Welcome to Off Script. I am one of your co-hosts, Will May.
And I'm Ashley, and this is the full disclosure on what it takes to really thrive in real estate. And today we are going to be talking about if open houses still work in 2025.
Well, do they? Do they still work?
I think they do.
Yeah?
I do.
Okay, let's get into why we think that. I'm a big fan of open houses, for sure, and I feel like from a mindset perspective, kind of touching on that first, like when the NAR settlement happened last year, I feel like you've said like you've seen an increase in calls. What are you seeing since that happened in the middle of last summer?
I feel like since the NAR settlement, I've gotten an increased amount of sign calls. And then also just, I wouldn't say that more open house traffic because of it, but more unrepresented buyers because of it. I think, whatever was out there in the media, a lot of people think, I'm going to get a better deal if I go straight through the listing agent. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big either misconception or just what people think out there in the community. And so I've seen a spike in just coming directly to the listing agent, trying to come straight to the open houses or calling the sign to go through directly.
A lot of people think calling the agent on the sign or being at that first weekend of open houses is going to be the best way to, hopefully get that listing or buy that house, right? And they go straight to the listing agent. Mm-hmm. So being there, right? Being in an open house, whether it's yours or not, is going to put you in a position where people think, hey, this person has knowledge about this house and I need to ask them in order to get a quote unquote good deal.
Yeah, I think like there's been an evolution of open houses pre-COVID, and then now post-COVID. And I think they were kind of dead and obsolete during the COVID times because the houses were selling so quickly. You couldn't even find time to host the open house. So I'm actually glad that it's not the way that it used to be because it really is a lead generation tactic for either you as a listing agent if you're hosting your own or if you have a buyer agent like we do to pick up additional leads from them as well. So I do feel like we're starting to get back into that time frame of where houses are sitting a little bit longer than they used to sit. You actually have time to do an open house, market an open house, and do it effectively if you have time to take all of the right steps with it.
Yeah.
And I just think talking about mindset a little bit, there's a big misconception that they don't work or they're a waste of my time. I get there and nobody shows up. So I think we should dive a little bit more into just the mindset of like, why do you host an open house?
Yeah. The number one thing I think people have a misconception about is the stat is 1% of homes are sold at the open house. Mm-hmm. So I think that's like the starting point when it comes to mindset. I don't think that 1% of houses are sold in open house because they're not valuable. I think it's because over time technology's changed. So you see things online first. You see things on Zillow or your agent sends you something. Technology is able to deliver that to you quicker, which means that's the source of which that business came from, right? Mm-hmm. If there wasn't technology, open houses would obviously be a much higher percentage of homes that are sold. But what we're not taking into consideration is they still have to see the house. Mm-hmm. And that open house, first weekend, second weekend, whatever it is, that's the moment where they've seen it from the internet. Then they can come actually with their agent or actually view the home that first time. And creating demand in that open house can help you get more money for your sellers, but also put you in a position to pick up more and more leads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I think there's so much stuff you can do if you're there and nobody does show up. But I think most importantly, taking a step back and talking a little bit about how do you get people to come to the open houses to begin with and diving a little bit of strategies of how to get people there so that you're not wasting 3 hours of your time prepping for that, going there, and then nobody shows up.
Yeah. Before we get into that real quick, one more thing on mindset.
Yeah.
You have to believe it works. Mm-hmm. Like when you go into any lead generation session, whether it's cold lead gen, open houses, calling database, you have to have an intent. And my intent is to set an appointment today. And you have to believe that that's possible before you go into an open house. Otherwise, what's going to happen? You're going to start to get a very stagnant, flow of traffic, or you're not going to get the right people into your open house at that time. So having a more positive mindset towards, hey, I'm going to this open house. My goal and my focus is to set an appointment is literally so much more important than we give it credit.
Yep.
So trying to get people to your open houses, what do we do? Do we just, call your friends and have them come?
So, I mean, there's a lot of different strategies and tactics. I'm going to talk through some of them, but we don't do all of these on every single open house. These are just some ideas that you can do. But our team personally, I like to, if we're going to do an open house, I like to host it usually on a Sunday, weekend one, when we go live on the market right away, especially if I'm dealing with families that have kids and dogs and all of that. And, we're really just trying to get that demand first weekend on market. I'm trying to relieve a little bit of stress from them of getting most people to the open house instead of a ton of private showings if I can as well. But we put all of our houses on the market on a Thursday, and then showings begin Friday. Typically try to do an open house on Sunday. And some things that we do to pre-market that, obviously we run some digital ads, whether that's Facebook and Google, to get people there. You could do flyers and door knocking, a little bit of a traditional method, but I don't think it's dead, and I think it still works. So go door knock 100 doors nearest that, invite the neighbors over. Again, it's a lead generation tactic. So your goal is to get the neighbors there, see that you're actually a working agent that tries to sell your listings, and you're potentially going to pick up other listings just from meeting the neighbors. I've seen a lot of people do neighborhood previews. I did it one time. I actually don't know why I stopped doing that, where you can exclusively invite just the neighbors to the first hour of your open house before you open it up to the public. So I think that's another good lead generation tactic. And then you could also call around all of the agents that have sold listings in that area in the last few months, because they may have picked up other buyers from their listings. And so go on the MLS, look at the last 90 days of who sold listings in that neighborhood, and invite them or invite their clients to it by sending them a specific invite with open house information that you're also sending to the entire database, your email, through your email marketing system. You're going to invite all the agents, but if you want to be a little bit more honed down on that specific area, go and actually take the time to look up the agents who sold in that area.
Yeah, especially low days on market.
Yeah.
Right, because that means they probably had a little bit more demand. We could go through all of those, actually. You went through those pretty quickly, but I think there's a lot of meat in there.
Okay.
So let's start with email marketing, go social media. I'll cover the actual lead gen activities, and then that idea of inviting agents was really good. So email marketing, start with that. No showings until Friday, open house is Saturday. When are we starting to email about the open house?
Right away. So we put all of our listings in coming soon status. So if we already know the open house time before we go live on market, which usually we do, we'll include it in the coming soon marketing, and then in our just listed marketing. And then also Nicole will send out a separate email that she schedules out the morning of the open house to send out to the realtor database. So I think we do 3 prior to the open house even happening.
And those are going just to realtors or to our database?
Those are going, so we have one specific to the realtors, and then we also include it in we'll highlight certain listings that we're doing or featured listings in our Toast post, which is our weekly email specifically to our database. So invite our database as well.
Cool.
Yep.
And to pair with that, social media, what's that look like?
Social media, so she does Instagram post, Facebook post, sometimes TikTok, just kind of depends. And then you're running all of the ads. So then we also do an ad via, is that Facebook or Google that you're doing those
Facebook,
through? Yep, Facebook and Google ads.
So Facebook ads that just say, hey, we're open with the times underneath it.
Yep.
Cool. And that's obviously not to realtors. That's going to be more public facing. Okay. And then from a lead generation, your actual activities. So email marketing is more passive. Your activities that you could do. There's a lot of different models for this, right? I learned from Gene Rivers, is an old KW lead gen master, about how to promote open houses, and he had a listing process, but just one piece of his listing process, he called it the 20-20-20 rule, which is 20 doors to the left, 20 doors to the right, and then 20 across the street. So you probably hear that floating around. But what it is really just inviting the neighbors. Number one, letting them know you're having an open house, which is respectful to the neighborhood. But second of all, asking them if they know of anybody they want to be their neighbors. And if I do have a ton of traffic or other buyers that are looking in the area, asking them if they would be looking to potentially make a move.
Yep.
And this really does work. That's a really good way to push your name in a certain neighborhood. So our listing process is to do that same call or door knock for coming soon open houses and just sold. But if we're just focusing on the open houses, don't do just 20, 20, and 20. Do as many as possible if you have the time and the effort to do so, because you're going to get other neighbors coming just because they want to see the home, which is going to get you into the right conversations when you're at the open house.
Yeah, and I think from a lead capture standpoint, always have a call to action on any of your marketing, flyers, whatever it is that you're doing. So if you are going to take the time to go door knock 100 doors or go drop off flyers to the neighborhood or mail postcards, which I still see people do that, but sometimes you don't have time to get those out before the open house if you're mailing quick enough. But have a call to action, whether that's a QR code with a link to HomeBot or whatever your CRM uses, of something like, hey, do you want to know your home value? Because that's just going to be another way to capture that person's information and follow up with them.
That's really good.
And a lot of sellers will click on that. And I do think it's a really great way to farm a neighborhood and get more listings. You know, people think door knocking is dead and all of these paper flyers things are dead. But if you're looking at it as, even if this doesn't sell my listing, I'm going to pick up other listings from doing that. That is the whole point of lead generating.
Yeah. Using open houses for lead gen is so important.
Yep.
I always just say this, but people have been door knocking for like hundreds of years. It's not going away. It's putting a face to the name, right? So going face to face will always work. It's just a lot more effort and it's a little bit harder to scale. But if you're a newer agent and you don't have any listings or anybody like any active business right now, get out and get in front of people.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good segue into, even if it's not your listing, go host other agents' open houses and follow the same process. Have the call to action as a QR code to obviously your information as far as getting them a home evaluation. And, you know, you could go and host if you want to really farm an area and become known as the agent in that area, even if they're not your listings, go host all of the open houses in that neighborhood that you see. Put yourself on a search, and every time a new listing pops up there, call that listing agent, ask if you can host an open house, because guess what? Now that neighborhood is going to see all of your signs bringing people to the open house. They're going to see you hosting the open house. Even if you're not the listing agent, that community and that neighborhood is going to see you as the person actively working that neighborhood at all of the open houses.
So good. I think that'd be so important. This stuff actually does work. When I had zero business, when I was literally starting out and had no database because I moved to obviously Huntington Beach, I didn't know anybody. I heard Gene Rivers' class, this 20-20-20 rule, 20 doors left, right, 20 from across the street. And knowing I had all the time in the world and no money and I didn't have any database, I just took that and I said, I'm going to do 100 to the left, 100 to the right, 100 across the street because I had the time to do so. And all of a sudden I started to be known in that area because I kept doing open houses the same way you're talking about right now. It does work. And if you ever have a listing that's overpriced or is sitting on the market, work an open house every single weekend. I did that for 8 weeks. We priced the listing at that time. It was $8.99. We were on the market for 7 or 8 weeks. I did open houses every weekend. I door knocked the neighborhood over and over again. Ended up getting 7 pieces of business just because that sat too long.
Wow.
And we ended up getting it sold. But like, think about all the time and effort going into that. But to get 7 more deals off of one listing that sat for just a little bit too long, and then we sold it, it works as long as you put the effort in.
Yeah, I think, effort and intentionality with what you're saying, because, you know, a lot of people complain, oh, just the nosy neighbors that are coming to look at the open house. Well, like, who cares? Those could be your potential listings. So that neighborhood preview, I've only done it once, but I've heard a lot of success from people doing it. I might try and reactivate doing that, but who cares if they're nosy neighbors, and who cares if they have no interest in buying the house? They probably don't. They might know somebody that does, but it gives you an exclusive opportunity to, you know, be belly to belly with 5 people that live in that neighborhood.
Yes.
And get to know them, build a relationship, put them on your, you know, long-term drip database, whatever you want to call it, and stay in touch with them.
Yeah, nosy neighbors own homes.
Yeah.
Right? And they're going to move at some point. So I think that's such a good point. And the mindset behind lead generating for open houses is, if I can talk to 100 people, can I go get 2 to 3 leads? And I think what people think is every single person I talk to should be a yes. But that just goes back to the fundamental mindset of lead gen, is like consistent activities, knowing it's a small percentage, but you're trying to find that small percentage to grow your database.
Yep. Now, I will say, if you are hosting somebody else's open house, do a little bit of research, actually get to know the house, ask the listing agent questions before you do. So because we have a buyer agent, listing agent model, I don't host my own. I do feel like in the past, I found a lot more success hosting my own open houses because you know the property really well if you are the listing agent and you're there to answer all of the questions. But Katie's done a really good job now of like prepping really well for asking me all of the information that she needs to know, like why are the sellers moving, if I'm allowed to disclose that. So if you are hosting for somebody else, ask those questions, do your research. It's very, very frustrating if somebody's hosting my open houses and they're asking me a million questions that are public knowledge that's on the MLS.
Yeah.
Like you should know your stuff before you're hosting for somebody else, and give them the feedback of how it went so they can get back to their sellers.
Yeah. You don't need to know everything.
Nope.
but do the research to know enough and to be able to speak to the area. Know what other ones are pending or active or just sold in the neighborhood. So yeah, do your research to know the area that you're going to be in. And if you don't know, use that as a good opportunity to get the answers for them. So if you don't know the answers to what questions they're asking at the open house, use that as a positive and say, hey, I'm going to figure out these answers. I'll get back to you this evening. Follow up, do your job, make sure you get the answers to them. But what a good reason to contact them again after.
Yep, and get their information.
So if you don't know everything, that is A-okay, and use it to your advantage. Okay, what do we got next? We have pre-marketing, getting people there. Should we talk about at the open house?
Yeah, so like converting leads, what to say.
Yeah, I think, again, another huge misconception that agents have when it comes to working an open house is not understanding how to ask the right questions. So when we do our lead generation practice and script and role play, we always focus on asking 6 to 10 questions to build rapport and to understand if we can help that buyer out or that lead. I think where people struggle heavily is somebody will come into the open house, they'll ask, hey, how are you doing? They'll either let them walk through the open house or almost get like desperation commission breath, right? Like, are you working with an agent? No, okay, we should sit down and I'll tell you exactly what I do and how good I am, right? Like, that's not what we say, but that's how we come across to other people. So like, what's your approach when it comes to open houses and how to build rapport with leads?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be a pushy salesperson. People can read right through that. It's not authentic, and you're probably not going to really get that lead at that point. But I think just, one, don't be standing straight at the front door when they walk in. Like, take a step back. You don't need to be in the front doorway on top of them when they're walking in to greet them.
Like, looking through the windows.
Yeah. Give them a moment to just kind of like walk in. I always try and find some way. I do a lot of new construction open houses, so I don't do a lot of my pre-existing, but new construction. Give them a moment to get through that door, and I always try and find some way to build rapport or relate to them in some way, just to kind of like break the ice, because I feel like a lot of people come in and they immediately don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
So find some way to break the ice that has nothing to do with selling real estate. Find something relatable, maybe compliment something that they're wearing. Just find some common ground with them. But my favorite question to ask is, do you live in the area or are you looking in the area? And that's one that we practice a lot in scripts and role play, because it's a really good open-ended question that opens the gateway to then be able to guide the conversation from there. Because if they live in the area, now you have so many more follow-up questions you can ask. If they're renting, if they own a home, and like dive into that. And if they don't live in the area and they're moving from out of state or they're living with their grandparents, like, you immediately can understand the situation and where they're at, which dives into like 10 more questions you can ask them to open that conversation and guide it from there.
Yeah, I think getting used to asking questions is the first step. But the second step is learning how to guide with that. So people love options, right? Do you live in the area or are you just looking in the area? So like, figuring out a question that gives them 2 options will allow you to guide your following questions. And then to stay in it, like, hey, instead of what area are you looking in, why are you looking in this area? And going a little bit deeper with people. I think as agents, we take like the surface answer as the real answer. And not that buyers don't tell you everything, but people don't warm up to you and just trust you with everything that quickly.
Right.
So it's on us to build rapport and then ask the right questions. A really good example of this is, if you were to ask a buyer, what areas are you looking in? And they said, we're looking in Elkhorn. We just take that and say, okay, perfect. Like, awesome. How many beds? How many baths? And we keep moving. But if your sibling that lives in Papillion was like, hey, we're moving to Elkhorn tomorrow, your first question isn't going to be, how many beds do you need? You're going to say, well, why the heck are you moving, right? So that's what we need to do with our leads too, is understand the why behind certain things. We need 4 bedrooms. Why do you need 4 bedrooms? What a great question to ask, because now I'm learning about their family, the type of lifestyle that they live, if they work from home, and those questions will help me understand you a lot better and if I can help you.
Yeah. And I mean, they already know the stats of the house. Everything is online. They already know. I mean, I don't hit them with, this is a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 2-story. Like, they know.
Right.
They absolutely know already. They looked up everything online. That's why people are busy. They're taking their time out of their day to come there. They already know the stats on the house. So you don't need to spend 5 minutes talking.
Yeah.
Just start asking questions. Give them the skinny. It's a 4-bed, 3-bath, and that's it. And I don't really say anything else about the house. Let me know if you have any questions, and then I start diving more into questions about them.
Right. What are some of those questions that are important to ask?
Do you live in the area, or are you looking to move from the area? I will ask them, depending on how they answer that, a lot of times I'll ask them, are you currently renting or do you own a home?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's going to guide the conversation completely different if they're a buy-sell.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on like how far into the conversation I've gotten with them. Sometimes I'll ask them if they've already started the pre-approval process. I'll try and gauge how early on in the process they are. Is this my very first day out and about on a Sunday looking at houses, or we've been looking for 6 months online and we're pretty active, we've been pre-approved? Like, you're kind of trying to gauge the timeline
Mm-hmm.
of where they would be in your pipeline if they are a viable lead, and how serious they are. Not that you wouldn't help them if they're not serious, but just to kind of gauge that. And then I always ask them if they're working with a realtor.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we could maybe pause on that because I feel like people are afraid to ask that question because they're afraid to know the answer.
Yeah, that's the truth. We're afraid to know if it's a yes, we are, right?
Yeah, like, I don't want to get shot down. And then if they say they are working with a realtor, most people immediately stop and are like, okay, I'm not speaking to them anymore.
Yeah.
But what I found a myth with that, or a common misconception, is they all tell you they're working with a realtor. But usually as I start asking questions and really get to know them more, I find out they're not working with a realtor. They just say that to get you to stop talking them. They'll say that, and it could just be they met a realtor at an open house that's been sending them listings, but they don't have a relationship with them. They've never done a buyer consult, and they're not actually committed to working with somebody.
Yeah. But probably the funnest follow-up question is, what's their name?
Yeah.
Because they're like,
I don't remember.
Oh, yeah, we met with them. I can't remember right now off the top of my head. And then, like, that's a good way to give them an out, but also, ask good questions, create a little bit of doubt in what they're doing, and you can, they can become clients for life.
Yeah, I think with the realtor question, I mean, obviously you never want to step on toes or steal somebody, so you want to be very clear on if they've signed a buyer exclusive and that you're not trying to poach them from other agents. But I do think it's fair game to ask them more questions. A lot of times I'll ask, well, how's that going? Have they explained to you what it's like to buy a house in this market? I'll just ask an open-ended question.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, well, like, no, nobody's sat down and explained anything to me. I met them 6 months ago, and I actually haven't heard from them since. And I've been finding all of my own business on Zillow or all of my own listings on Zillow and just going to open houses. So like, they aren't really working with somebody.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And then you can dive a little bit more into that. And then by the end of it, if you're providing your own value and explaining to them what you would do to help them, then now they can make a good informed decision if they haven't exclusively signed with someone, if they want to take that time to explore that relationship with you and do an actual buyer consult.
That's right. No, I think that's what you just said is so important. And then practicing those things, right? Like in script and roleplay, we practice the icebreaker at the beginning, right? Make it a fun mood, make it a good environment, like practice these little details and be intentional with the questions you're asking. And if you want to set an appointment, find a problem. If you can solve a problem for your lead, you'll set an appointment with them. And what better question to ask than, why do you think you haven't made this move yet? That question is going to isolate the exact reason why they haven't made a move or what the problem may be that you're able to solve with them. Yep.
And then recap and close, like we've talked about on this podcast several times.
Yeah. Recap and close. 6 to 10 questions. Be intentional with those questions. Ask why. Recap, close. Your appointment setting conversions will go through the roof.
Yep. And I think, we talked about this already a little bit, but just don't be desperate and salesy of like, okay, I met with you. What's your email? And I'm going to start sending you houses.
Yep.
I never do that, actually. If you're just going to open houses, hosting them, getting people's email and putting them on a search and sending them houses, like, you probably have a very low conversion rate if you're doing that. Just be patient and take the time to really get to know them, and then find an opening to set an appointment, to set a buyer consult. And if they're, oh, just send me houses. Well, actually, I don't do that because I want to actually educate my clients and go through the process of how I'm going to help you. Any realtor can send you houses.
That's right.
So if you want to take the time, let's, do a 30, 45-minute buyer consult, go over the process, what value I'm going to add to you outside of setting you up on a search list, and talk through that and get that appointment set. You have a much higher chance of actually converting the lead, of getting an appointment with them and going through that instead of just setting them up on a search and never seeing them again.
100%. So open houses do work.
They do work.
This is your time to go to an open house, a house that's for sale that you're trying to sell. We're trying to sell houses, right? Put yourself in the product and allow motivated buyers to come to you. Open houses 100% work. In the past 90 to 120 days, we probably put under contract or sold 75 to 80 homes. Between 8 and 10 of those came from open houses. So we know we're database driven, but if you don't have business and you're an agent that needs to fill your pipeline, get out and promote your open houses, sit in them every single weekend and watch what happens to your pipeline and how it grows over the next, 2 months.
Yep.
Okay, I think we've covered everything at open houses.
I think we did.
Okay, we'll see you guys next week.
All right.